Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I hope you can hear and see me well to another Illuminating Dialogues with my good friend Davina. How are you,
Hello,
Davina?
everyone.
Hello. So, as always, we're just going to do a nice chill chat. And the intention behind Illuminating Dialogues, as you know, if you've watched the podcast with Lavanya and Sunny, is dialogue in Greek, is flow of meaning. So it's Davina and I coming together with our experiences of the world and experiences of how we're living life, and then sharing that with one another because we haven't actually seen each other in quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then through that, just venturing into a space that's unexplored by both of us, and hopefully sharing that with you, that illumination or that light. And then the
Mhm.
sum is greater than the whole. So then we can go away, and you guys can go away after watching this with more of an openness of the world and more of a richer understanding. So that's illuminating dialogue. So, yes, Davina, how are you doing? And where are you
I'm
coming from today?
I'm good. I'm good. This is almost like a catch up
It
between me and
is.
you
Yeah, yeah.
because it's been so long. But I'm coming from London at the moment, just doing my study. So yeah, I'm just based in like Central.
Nice. Yeah, and it has been a while. I think when was COP 26? 2021, right?
I think so. Yeah, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. So Davina and I first met in COP 26 in Glasgow, which is where I'm
Mhm.
from. And if you just want to share about people who maybe not don't know you or people who've not come across you before, just about your journey, how you
Yeah.
even first came to COP 26, or I know you're studying at SOA, so like how did
Mm.
you come to that route in your life?
Yeah. So, as I've been introduced, I'm Davina Kaur. I'm currently 21, but when I went to COP, I was like 19, I think.
Yeah,
Just turning, yeah,
that's
19,
right.
turning 20. Yeah, I was 19, but turning 20 in like a few days. And yeah, as you mentioned, I went to SOAS. So I did my undergrad in economics at SOAS. That was not my original plan. But
Mm,
it all worked out going to a university based in like revolution, decolonial systems, it all planned out. COP was very random. I think climate's been a big topic at the moment. And I think as youth, we feel like we have a responsibility to navigate our future and figure out like what climate change means. So with COP being in Glasgow, I just thought, why not go? Like it was very, very spontaneous. I did the homestay thing. I stayed with like a random stranger who ended up being like a senior professor lecturer at the University of Glasgow.
oh wow.
It was like such an amazing experience. And when I was there for a few days, I partnered with Sikh human rights groups. So I
Mm,
joined them, and then through sitting with them, was in a langar hall. Across the langar hall was Harjot, and we said hello. Like you've been here this whole time. You've been in the blue zone, the green zone.
yeah.
Everyone was confused as to what we were talking about. Yeah, and then we said, you mentioned EcoSeek. So
Yes.
EcoSeek is a Sikh organization that's not political. It's mainly NGO based, and they do a lot of work on spirituality and how does Sikhism align with environment? How can we like empower people from sort of like the grassroots level upwards to adopt like environmental ethical ways of living, and also sort of push not policymakers but other individuals, organizations, for example, like the Gurdwara or religious places of worship, to just be a bit more environmentally conscious. So,
Mm,
you introduced me to them and you were like, Davina, I'm joining this organization. Do you want to join? Do you want to join? We're
yes.
two Sikhs, environment, let's do it. We were like, yeah, power, the two youth, let's change it all. And yeah, we had like a conversation and we found out about a lot about each other. And like one thing we really connected on was our background,
Mm,
both from areas where there's not much diversity. We're kind of trying to navigate spaces of being a Punjabi, being a Sikh, trying to figure out like how those align in Britain today.
exactly.
Um, and just embracing our roots, and we found a lot of similarities, and sort of being growing up as like one of the only brown kids at school, and now being so immersed in our culture and having to like navigate that. But yeah, that's kind of how we met, a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I'm just resonating so much with you saying that. And the theme I titled this YouTube video is creating change one step at a time. So before we go into, I know you're studying some economics, macro, microeconomics, and hopefully we'll get to dive into a bit of the Sikh philosophy and how we use that in our life, and maybe the places you've traveled to and the people you've met and the conversations you've had. But before we sort of dive into that nice juiciness, I kind of want to structure this about creating change one step at a time, not just in the world, which obviously we want to do with people like EcoSeek and in the wider world, but really starting with ourselves. And you kind of hinted that on finding out, who am I, Punjabi in the UK, Sikh, and how can I create change, not just in the world, but in myself? Or how can I even first discover myself, and how can I operate in the world when I don't even know myself?
Yeah.
So maybe just, if I could ask you, like, what was that like growing up in, like you mentioned, like only brown kid at school, or like knowing about Sikhism. So what was that like growing up and kind of like discovering your roots? And I know it's a bit of a compound question, but then how did that make you want to study at SOAS?
Yeah, so I think growing up in a white area, English British, very much like being the only brown kid, you have a lot of question marks. Who am I? Why am I here? Because you don't get taught like the history, like colonial history. You're like, why am I here? And why is everyone being very intolerant to me being here? Because evidently I was like, for some reason, like asked to come. So I'm so confused. But I always had lots of question marks. I went to like Catholic schools, and a lot of the time people would ask me to explain myself. So I can remember being in year 3 and we had like a World India Day, and the teacher made me stand up and go, Davina, explain like about your culture. And I'm like, well, I don't know it. And like being at school saying, Davina, like, what do you believe? People would ask me to stand up and tell me like, what? Oh, Davina, we're talking to learn about Hinduism. Like, what do you believe? Do you believe in lots of gods? And I was just like, I'm just trying to play in the playground. Like, I don't really know. Like, I'm trying to figure out algebra. I'm not trying to figure out like deep identity crisis. But yeah, like that required at a very young age, you might have found that yourself, to think deeply, and it was quite a lot. But I also then asked my parents, like, what are we? Where are we from? And you kind of get told by your parents, like, you're from India, but you're very unaware that India is a subcontinent. Yes. You don't know. I only realized like so many years after asking those questions at a young age that how diverse our history is. And once I figured out that I was Punjabi and I figured out that we were Sikh, I really like navigated that and delved deep into it, because I was kind of lost on like what religious path I wanted to go on. So like Catholicism resonated with me, Islam resonated with me, but nothing was really like connecting. And then when I found Sikhi at like the age of like 14, I realized that women empowerment, the gender equality, the political side, the spiritual side, it all made a lot of sense. And I watched basic Sikhi videos by Jagraj Singh, like I think will bring me to tears, just like revolutionizing the game when it came down to like Naujuan and like young people finding out who they are. But I kind of delved deep into that and find a lot of contentment. I think school and times were quite difficult. And I think sometimes when you're getting racially abused all the time and you got so much burden because you're an ethnic minority household, you need to pull your weight. You need something to just calm you down and ground you, and just doing Naam Simran, doing Vaheguru Simran, just 5 minutes a day could just completely transform how you felt in a moment. And I think that definitely got me through like most of my childhood, just once I figured out what Sikhi was, just using that as my strength. And then I kind of realized that I wanted to study economics. I was always very business minded. My parents are shopkeepers. Business is like just the conversation topic at all times. Like, how do we make money? How do we grow a business? How do we level up? So I always wanted to be a businesswoman. So I thought economics, politics, philosophy, all those elements of like being spiritual that I found made me want to like learn about philosophy, being kind of set on changing the racism, changing the system, because of all the wide experience and how I'd seen that institutionally it's not acceptable, made me political. And then the economic side came from my family and being like, I want to make money, I want to do business. And then the three came together and I applied to Warwick and Manchester. Oops, can you still see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, I've lost the screen.
No worries. Take your time if you want to bring it back up again.
Yeah, but yeah, having those three things came together, and I looked at degree courses like that. Clearing happened, never got in anywhere, and then I got SOAS, but then SOAS changed my life. And the one thing that always makes me more grounded is hukam, like Guruji's command, like what God has written is written and it's made for you in a certain way. And I didn't realize how my path was written so much better than what I wanted. And I feel like you have a big realization when you realize you get what you need, not what you want. And it takes a long time to accept that. But once you accept it, it really makes you realize how to be a lot more grateful, to stop asking for so much, but accepting what you get. And I got into SOAS and it changed my life. It just revolutionized. I didn't realize there were so many people that thought like me, that wanted to change the system, that were political, that were radical, and all ethnic minorities. SOAS is a really high ethnic minority university, and there were a lot of people there with similar journeys. So that's what you asked, that compound question of faith, background, navigating, economics.
And it all ties together, right? It all ties together. Yeah. And just for the people listening to that, you know, if you're young, if you are from an ethnic minority, Davina shared so many tiny, but together, golden nuggets, right? Things like you don't have to follow your situation that you're in. You have the power to change your situation. You have the power to change the life, to change the systems you're in, to change yourself. That inspiration comes from that Miri Piri aspect. So like from a young age, you found out at 14. I find that amazing because it wasn't until later that I was doing my master's and I opened a book I was supposed to be doing my dissertation. It was in the library and I saw the history of the Sikhs. What is colonialization? You know, what is this? And then I asked my mum, and because she grew up in Britain, she didn't really get this taught at university. At school. And so, you know, I was really looking through this. And then I realized, oh my God, I don't know my own culture. I don't know my own background. And then what you said there about hukum for people who are not in the Punjabi or Sikh background is literally the flow of life, you know, because as humans, we can often think with our mind, or as we call that manas in Sanskrit. Behind that sits the buddhi, the wisdom. And, you know, the mind always wants to control things. And as Davina wonderfully says, actually going with the flow, accepting things as they turn out, that flow can actually make us realize that we will grow when we accept that. And I've had so many times in my life where, you know, I've been rejected from medicine. I applied 4 times, but that's turned out better for me. Or maybe I went down this route and I hit a wall there. I went to Germany and I didn't get my job because of COVID and I had to come back. But it took me on a different route as well. So I resonate with so many parts of that, accepting that hukum and accepting that will, you know, because a lot of anxiety can come from not accepting that. So I guess that's that Piri aspect, that internal reflection. But then it's so interesting how then, you know, that economics play into it. How does that work? Like when you're meeting people, I know you went to Germany recently. You can maybe talk about that a bit. When you're meeting people, how does that Sikhi or your own philosophical insight occur? And then how do you actually make change, right? Because there's one place to realize, hey, you know, this is me, this is my culture. But then how do I actually share this with people? How do we say, hey, guys, let's make change here?
Yeah. You know? I think the economics plays into the fact that we live in a capitalistic society. So to understand the key stakeholders in this world and understand how people operate, I think economics gives me a lot of grounding for that. So, for example, when there's so many wars going on in the world, we know that's the play of economics. Economic powers trying to make money. How can we exacerbate a war to get more out of it? How do we use people as labor? And we constantly take out the human side of like living. And when you understand how capitalistic the world is, when you have that philosophical side, it reminds you of that human element. It reminds you of that compassion. I feel like a lot of the time we lack compassion. You mentioned that I was in Germany, so I've joined a program called Dialogues Perspective, and it brings together different people from different religious backgrounds to just communicate, just to have that open dialogue and talk about political issues with the point of religion. I think, you know, centuries ago, religion came first and then your political views became around that. Whereas now it feels like religion is almost like a category of your values. Before, people would always be like, one of the first identifiers would be saying their faith. And that was kind of one of their key points of their personality, whereas now it's kind of put into like a category in a box.
Yes.
Like faith doesn't come into the conversation when it comes onto politics. Faith isn't necessarily a key player. But I always think about, for example, the COVID pandemic, when everyone was inside, it was always faith groups that came to the forefront and showed that they are a big backbone of society and community. And we really forget that element. Like, it's a lot more than what region you're from. It's also what faith you are from, because that like changes your morals. So we were kind of discussing these things, and one thing that I kind of did was discussing from a Sikh background how politics plays into it. And like you said, that Miri Piri, they're both equal. You both are meant to be equally spiritual as well as kind of like political and understanding of this world that we live in, this materialistic, this worldly sense. And I kind of like navigated it by saying, you know, you can act with compassion, but then you also act to stand up against injustice. And one thing that I love about Sikhi is it just has that balance. Like, I can meditate and be completely in a sense of bliss, in oneness internally, but I also know, and through that contentment, all I want to do is do seva and bring good to others, because I want to share that bliss with others. I want to make everyone else sort of be on an equal playing field and have that equality. And it just kind of spurs me on both ways, and that economic sense just gives me like an understanding of the world and how to actually spread that spiritual element.
Amazing. And just the energy behind what you're talking, it even shows that as well, because when you talk, there's a certain energy, there's a certain groundedness, and there's a certain wholesome and authenticity behind your voice. And so people, absolutely. I mean, if you're listening to this in the chat, feel free to also ask any questions you have for us. But that comes across as well. And so anyone watching, if you've watched my live streams, I've talked about meditation and I've talked about how that can affect us. But I haven't covered that more in a Sikhi point of view in Simran. So if you could explain to people who may not practice Simran every day, like, you don't have to do so technically, but just like how does that work? Like, say you've not done Simran, someone's not done Simran, and how your mind is during the day, and then if you do Simran, or like how long do you do it for, or like when do you do it, and like what does that actually do just for you personally?
Yeah, so Simran just means repetition.
Okay.
So you can do Simran of any kind. As a Sikh, I do Vaheguru Simran. In a lot of religions, it tells you to focus on the name of God across all of them, and in Sikhi we really take that as very literal, and we do a lot of Vaheguru Simran. That's just repeating the word Vaheguru, and that is kind of how that is sort of like the name for God that we tend to use. So there are so many names to talk about sort of God, the Lord, Allah, but Vaheguru is the one we use, and Vah just means wow, and Guru just means from darkness to light. So like sort of like wonderful, like wondrous God, like that enlightenment from darkness to light. And yeah, sort of what I do in the day is just whenever, wherever. When I'm sometimes walking up an escalator and I need a bit of strength, for example, this may sound so silly, but I just do Vaheguru with my steps. Like as I'm walking, with each step, I go Vaheguru, 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 and just be in a state of just like meditation, just in my actions, and that just grounds me. Like it gives me so much strength. Like honestly, try it. Me and my friends are just so silly. We just try anything. So if we're trying to walk really quickly and we're racing, one way to like control your breathing and just be in a state of like removing that sense of like focusing on like your pain or focusing on your thoughts, just being in that state, you just flow. Like we can just walk really quickly. It just puts you in a state of like stillness, almost like when I'm working, or when people say I need 10 minutes to breathe, I just do Vaheguru Simran for 10 minutes. And one thing that we try to do as Sikhs is to get to the point where we're in a constant state of meditation. And that doesn't mean that you need to be putting in half an hour aside every single day and being strict on your meditation. It's just whenever you just want to, you can just meditate. Whether that's obviously you want to be on your chonkra, or you want to have your legs crossed, posture straight. Of course, you want to unlock all your senses and be in the best state possible, because that level of meditation is a very, very like enjoyable state of meditation and bliss. But you can do it whenever, wherever. And I think we need to stop being so rigid on it and put spirituality in such a bracket. I think at that conference I spoke about this. I was the only person from a non-Abrahamic faith, and it was just so fascinating how they view spirituality. This is no shade. It's just very fascinating how they separate religion and spirituality to two different brackets. They kind of say they're separate, whereas for Sikhs, it's not separate.
It's the Miri Piri again.
Exactly. It never has been separate. It's so universal. And so across all of Sikh principles, across all of the religion, and that spirituality we've kind of put as like a fashionable thing, as like, oh, you know, it's like almost separate to reason. You're either a reasonable person and a logical person, or you're a spiritual person. And that I don't understand it. I'm sorry. I don't understand it. Because for me, it's so logical to control and connect to yourself internally, to come out with wisdom and to come out with knowledge. If you're not centered, then how are you supposed to add practicality to your life and like just be logical? But yeah, I just feel like that was so fascinating how spirituality we put in a separate bracket, but it's so pivotal towards life. You know, now we have mantras and we have like affirmations and all these things, but in our faith, it's been there from the beginning, you know, just to sort of meditate and connect inwards.
And Davina, you put it so beautifully, because it's become so commercialized in a sense, and people, and it's also taboo, right? Because even sharing this stuff initially, it's like, oh, like who am I to talk about it, or like, what are people going to think about me, right? I'm talking about like meditation, but actually, guys, meditation, all you're doing is checking in with yourself. You're literally going in and you're like, hey, what's happening inside myself? Because if you can't control yourself, how the heck are you going to control the world, right? Or not even control the world, but just participate in the world. Who are you becoming? Who are you being in the world? You know, and it's all about connecting to yourself. And then you're able to have, it's not just for yourself, it's the relationships you have. The depth of relationships you have with your parents, with your brother, sister. Then it goes all the way up to families, through cultures, to countries. You know, that's how this consciousness develops. But it all starts from that stillness. And Vaheguru, you don't have to use Vaheguru. It's just it's just a mantra. It's just a method. But there is a certain power in that Sikhs use, and Hinduism have this, Islam have this. But the important thing to recognize is that if we want to create change one step at a time, we've got to start with ourselves. We've got to understand ourselves. Even if you're not the most emotional or intuitive person, you can still be logical and say, hey, I want to logically and practically understand myself better. So, that was my wee ramble on that. But
I agree with you. All we are is, like, for example, we are not our body. We are not our brain. All we are is a state of consciousness. That's all we have. We don't necessarily have, like, we don't know how our brain works. We're just aware of the consciousness within our brain. So if we can't actually, like, meditate and sort of, like, go inwards to balance that consciousness and give ourselves some state of peace, then how are we supposed to operate?
Exactly. And it's having that combination of both body and mind. Because, I conduct workplace meditation. I don't say Waheguru in my work, but in my corporate work meditations, I do this attention then meditative exercise. And we've had over 200 people join, Meditation Mondays and etc. And directors have come and said, thank you for this. My mind is racing like a hamster wheel at 10 o'clock at night, and I can't shut it off. And they're a high level director, and if they're going about work day to day and they're looking after their kids and they're doing business at that high state, how are we going to create a world if our minds are always busy and we can't see clearly what type of world are we going to produce? And we can see that what type of world we're going to produce, what are we doing to the world. So the state of the world right now is a direct relationship to our state of consciousness.
Yeah. And that's interesting you say as well, like high up directors, people that have achieved a lot in this material sense, still feel a sense of emptiness or a sense of a lack of understanding of themselves. And we can chase obviously all these positions and money, but if you haven't looked inside, you're still going to be at the same point as you started off at, of that not knowing, not having an understanding of yourself.
So true. And then because I really wanted to ask you this question as well, I had this written down, is sometimes in the morning, I'm sure other people, including me, wake up in the morning and we feel like not getting out of bed because you feel like that, maybe that lack of you're just going to do something that's not aligned with you. So what keeps you, like when you're waking up, I'm sure you have these days as well, but what keeps you like aligned and saying, hey, that's not emptiness inside. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do something that aligns with me, because there could be people right now watching this and being like, I just don't want to wake up in the mornings.
I feel that, especially now it's cold.
Yeah, me too. Not gonna lie, in Scotland.
Yeah, I can imagine. What gets me out of bed in the morning? I think just appreciating what you have, appreciating what you can experience in the day. A lot of the time I don't want to wake up, but I just think I'm so fortunate to experience breathing. I'm so I can't say the word now. Fortunate. Yeah.
There you go.
I'm so fortunate to just exist, just to feel, just to walk. And I think one thing that I have that discipline is I want to do my Japji Sahib in the morning. I want to pray in the morning. I want to wake up. I want to start my day like that. And that drives me, that discipline of being like, well, I need to get up now. I need to do my Japji Sahib and then I can start my day. Then I can think properly. That gives me discipline. I'm sure you explain in a minute, Japji Sahib for me. But yeah, just realizing how fortunate you are and the experiences that you're going to miss out on in the day. Not to have the FOMO, but just that appreciation of I've been given another day.
Yes.
Is really important.
And often we can forget that, because when you just wake up in the morning, say you're lying in bed, you wake up. Sometimes you do have a stillness. You forget your name, right? You forget where you are, especially if you're in another country. And then the mind kicks in. And then you realize, oh, but there is a state of consciousness where the mind doesn't kick in. And when we're in that state, right? When we're in that japji, we're jumping, you're right, I'm going to say this, we're repeating. And ji is just a respect and honorific term. But not just when we're saying it, when we're contemplating these words, or we're contemplating a certain aspect in the morning. In the morning, the world of Maya, the world of illusion, is sleeping before sunrise. There's no sort of vibrational mess occurring. So the mind is very still. And so we can tap into that. And just like we did at the start of this Illuminating Dialogues, we set an intention. We set an intention for this, what this dialogue is going to be. And then we also set an intention of what your day is going to be and who you are. And so when you live life by setting an intention, then suddenly things open up a lot more, because we have that, like almost like a sword mentality of the mind. It's still open, but we still have that really sharp aspect of the mind, and it's focused, and we're like, I'm not just my mind, I'm in my body, I'm in my breath, and everything's still in silent, and then go from there. That's what I do anyway, or I try to do. I know it's hard, but it does help me. So yeah.
I love how calm you are. I love how opposite we are.
It's amazing. It's that yin yang, right?
Yeah.
But I do tend to do that. But then also wanted to ask about, and go back to that before we go into that more economic aspect. And feel free if you want to take this conversation another route, is the mindset that help you move past any barriers. Because to be honest, I didn't experience much racism or anything, or at least I didn't think I did growing up. I did roll up the windows to Punjabi music, right, when I was growing up, because I was ashamed. I ended up doing Bhangra, and then now I put my windows down and listen to Siddhu or whatever. But what mindset did you have growing up, and what barriers did you really have? Because I feel people watching that, they could be watching this and be like, I don't have any barriers in my life. You know, I'm brown and I'm cool. But what could there be that they could not see, for example, you know, that you might have been like, hey, you know, that's actually a weird barrier that I never actually saw, but it's actually a barrier of the system.
I think it's very dependent on the person, but I was from a small town, so I just saw people not, perhaps, I don't know, I don't know how to put it in a very, very polite way, but I just almost wanted more for myself.
Okay.
In a sense. So I was from a deprived area. I just wanted more for myself. I just knew that there was more than just getting married and having like a very normal 9-to-5 job where I didn't care about what I did for work. I wanted to care about where I placed my energy. And I think Punjabi sort of communities can be a bit misogynistic, unfortunately. And as a woman, I just didn't like the way things were. I just didn't believe that I was going to be stuck in a patriarchal sort of household or society, and all those barriers of feeling almost like my future's kind of limited unless I do something made me act, because I wasn't going to necessarily sit silently and allow people at school to call me the P word and then laugh it off and be like, oh, that's normal. That's normal because I live in this country. It's like, I'm a third generation immigrant. Like, my grandparents came here, my parents are born here. And there was so many little things that it almost just felt like I'm not going to just let that be. I'm not going to like just accept people just taking advantage of my kindness or taking advantage of my presence just because that's how it is. So I think those barriers were kind of people telling me what I should do or where I should be or what I am. And I didn't like people telling me how to be or who I was. I wanted to sort of make my own. So that's kind of how I pushed out of it, just kind of that sense of there is better out there and I will do better. Not to spite other people, but because I will not fall into what they think I am. And I've always been kind of like that, sort of like not defying rules. I was always really well behaved, but I was defying stereotypes. I didn't like being put into a category necessarily, because I think something innate in me didn't like that. And the closer I got to Sikhi, the more I realized it's because we've never been the norm. As Sikhs, we've never been sort of simple and not courageous and not willing to stand up for something. And I felt like that was always within me. Sort of, I don't know what it was, whether, you know, people past lives, whether I don't know what my past life was, not to get deep. But I just like something didn't sit right with me with just being so regular.
Yes.
So.
And I've heard in the coaching community, people call this lamron. And Lamron is the opposite of normal. Literally, normal spelled backwards. And you're absolutely right. Like, and noticing when you're put in the box, noticing when people say, oh, that's just normal. Noticing that, hey, this isn't right. Because people often don't notice that. And so, like, how do you notice that? And you said there's something innate in you, and it's to trust that instinct. Because a lot of people, they're disconnected from that thing that you said that was innate. You know, some people might call that intuition. But it's that thing, that innate thing.
Yeah. Like, all my siblings liked listening to pop music, which is nothing wrong with that. But I just liked listening to Hindi music or Punjabi music. I just could not understand why I was so different. And it's so bizarre. I think we'll talk about this later on at university and things, but I was always so different, and it was so easy for me to conform and to be like everyone else in order to fit in, because I could have had a lot more friends growing up. I kind of chose to pick like the people wouldn't necessarily sit with, because I just preferred their company. Like, I wouldn't necessarily fit into, like, in the playground, the normal hierarchies of popularity and things. I just, for some reason, I just didn't like it. I just didn't like being told this is how things are. And I always sense myself being a bit weird. And everyone's a little bit weird, but it's whether you want to listen to it or whether you want to change, because everyone is unique. And I just could not conform. I've always been in the middle of my class. I stand up and talk about Sikh history, Punjabi history, to a bunch of, people that had no understanding of that background. But I would be like, well, I'm going to be weird and tell you about it because I'm interested in it. And I don't know what it was. I knew I had nothing to lose.
Wow.
People have a lot of attachment, hold on to things. I have nothing to lose if no one likes me here.
Wow.
I think that's how I was. I would much rather follow my instinct of being like, I like this kind of music. I like this kind of way. I like history. I like this. Then, I don't know. I felt I just could not conform. I hate conforming.
That's amazing. And you just followed that, because that's so inspiring to me, and I'm sure everyone else watching, because a lot of people do suppress stuff, parts of themselves growing up. They suppress their interests. They might suppress parts of them. And then what happens is that accumulates, and then suddenly you got to work past through all that. But if you can just embrace yourself and, like you said, not care if anyone who doesn't like you, because you don't have to please everybody. You're not here for everyone to like you, but you're here to express your divine nature, whatever you want to call it, your gift set, your natural talent in the world. And that's how a flower becomes a flower. Right?
Exactly. And it's all about just analyzing, because people will criticize regardless. I think Sikhi teaches us to question things. Sikhi teaches us to say, don't even follow Sikhi, like, think about it. What do you believe? Question all of the principles. Don't ever follow something how it's said. And I feel like in life, I was always quite analytical. So I could look at people that conformed, and even they would get told off. Even then there's something they would do as wrong. So then it's kind of realizing the fact that why are you trying to be a certain way? Because nothing is ever right. You're always going to get criticized. And I think as adults now, we're quite more aware that what's the point? Because someone's going to complain. I think growing up, I had very critical people around me, and they had so much tension internally because they were so critical and judgmental and saying, you do this, you do that. I just didn't like how I could see that tension. I didn't want to be so tense. So I just kind of let go instead.
Wow. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that they have to meet the outside world and they have to dissolve their intention inside. But you're saying, like, well, no, you can dissolve the tension by actually doing what you want to do. And exactly. That it might sound like, oh yeah, that's normal, but to a lot of people, it's actually not the way. And like Sikhi, for those who don't know, Sikh means learner. So it's really a true philosopher. You're literally questioning everything. You're accepting, but you're kind of questioning everything.
Yeah. And we even have guru, so you're the learner and the guru means teacher. Yes. I always say I am only ever a Sikh of the guru. I'm only ever a learner of from my teacher. That's all you ever are. You don't ever know everything because you're not the one that has all the answers. And it's just letting go. Just stop holding on. Stop trying to hold on to everything and know everything, because it's okay. It's okay not to know. Just follow what is set for you and follow your instinct. And I feel like when you just let go, you just feel like, even talking about it, I just feel at ease. I just feel relaxed.
It's amazing. And I feel relaxed hearing this as well, right? And I hope you do too at home. But what I wanted to kind of go to next, unless you have anything else you wanted to say on that, was more in the practical aspects. And I'll open YouTube here as well, just in case anyone's been putting comments and I've been missing everyone's nice comments. But one of my good friends, Amr, actually wrote a nice question for this live stream. Is there any point in which change can and should stop? So we talked about changing ourselves and sticking to our true values, but also implementing change in the world. So I'm not sure if you meant personal change or changing the world, but let's take it as both. Is there any point in which change can and should stop? What would you say?
I think it's when you're changing for others and you're trying to look for more questions than needed. I think sometimes as humans we try and overcomplicate things. Me and my friend Jagandeep were having this conversation and we go, there's so many words, like keywords these days, that we find a bit unnecessary. Like, I was at the conference and they were like multi-directionary. What does this mean? Like, well, why? We think we as humans, we overcomplicate things and we're trying to add lots of questions and navigate things by just making up concepts. And I think you just need to be accepting of who you are and stop trying to necessarily over-examine yourself. Of course, understand yourself, but don't over-examine yourself to the point you think that you're more complex than you are. I think Sikhi tells you just accept, just to be at peace and be compassionate, be caring. Don't hold on to anger, lust, greed, attachment, ego. And I think once you just have and follow some core principles, you don't need to keep changing for others or adding too many elements to things. I think we're constantly overcomplicating, and it's not that meant to be that complex.
No, it's so interesting, because when you look outside, we're always going to keep coming back to Simran, because that's always at the root. But when your eyes are looking out, the world is complex, right? And we can see the world, and it just seems so complex because the mind is focusing outwards. But when we close our eyes, and like you said, the patriarchal community, the more masculine community, I don't like to assign gender, but let's say that we're not talking about human genders here, but we're just talking about the energies that may be represented more in general by genders. So let's say it's a more masculine energy. Your eyes are distracted. When we're closing this and we're tuning into a more feminine energy of our ears, and we listen to that's closest to us and listen to that's farther away, everything becomes much more simple. And it's kind of that energy that we're looking for in our life. Because the eyes and the more masculine energy tends to want to do things, tends to want to overcomplicate and analyze, which is fine. It has its place. But then there's a more subtler energy. There's a more humbler energy. And that's one that's more fragrant in nature. And that's what we're talking about, more feminine in nature. And that's what that Sikhi, that spirituality brings to the table, that Piri element. And often I forget about that all the time. I'm always over analyzing and complicating things. So, that's good to hear from myself as well.
Yeah. But how would you answer that question?
Honestly, I was thinking about that. Such a good question, Amr. I like the way Davina answered it. Is there any point in which change can and should stop? My mind goes to change in what people are trying to do in terms of the economic gain. People are constantly trying to change, do technological advancements, which is good, but it's not sustainable. I work in corporate right now, and what I see is efficiency, productivity overload, and there's no sustainability. When we're trying to change things and there's no sustainability, things are going to crumble. And we see that with the environment, we see that with mental health, we see that with social, political, and economic structures. So at what point change should stop? Change should stop when it stops being sustainable. And change naturally stops when it stops being sustainable, because that's not the universal order of things. The universal order of things is the flow state. Like Bruce Lee says, be water, my friend. Because it's literally, I've done a live stream on the golden ratio. You'll see that these mathematical structures flow through music and they flow through nature. So when change should really stop, it's not up to me to determine. It's a natural cause. Change naturally stops when it becomes dysfunctional. And we also see that emotionally as well. If your emotional moods are changing nonstop, you're eventually going to hit a wall of depression or anger, and that mood will stop. But if you're in a point of stillness and you're in the flow state, you're going to be creating things from that state, from that flow state, but then that's not going to stop because you're making things, but it's from a sustainable point. So it all depends on what aspect you're flowing from. That's, I think, how I would answer that. I hope it wasn't too abstract or philosophical, but yeah, that's how I would answer that question. I was just wondering, Davina, like, I was also doing like some research on you, and I went to Taiwan personally. Taiwan's very near and dear to my heart. I've got Taiwanese friends when I was studying in Hong Kong. My dad works for a Taiwanese company, and we had Taiwanese friends growing up. And I saw that you met someone from the Republic of China, Taiwan, and about the geopolitics. So I was wondering if you had any insight into that, and then how that, and like what you kind of drew from that, and then how that made you reflect on like, hey, that's happening on the other side of the world, but how does that actually play into kind of our lives here, like at home,
So I didn't know you were going to dig that up. So
sorry if you
obviously
don't
at
answer.
SOAS, no. So at SOAS, I focused my third year on East Asian economies, because obviously SOAS is like a university that allows you to focus on the global south. So I focused on Taiwan's economy, hence why I went to that event. And I asked about their economic systems, how that sort of plays into their economy, but also like their relationship with China in particular. So not to talk too much, but I was really fascinated how their relationship with China impacts Taiwan's economy, whether it's sufficient sort of solely or whether there is an interdependence between the two. And I was looking at that because we were in a state of borders. We're in a world of borders at the moment. We're in a world of separatism movements. Not to name any in particular, but a lot of people want to sort of live separately to other countries. And you see it with Ireland, you see it with Scotland, you see it with Northern Ireland. And I'm very fascinated as to how once a country becomes separate, for example, if we see Taiwan as separate to China, I know some people do, some people don't, it's very contested. How does that play in sort of like the global political spectrum? So I kind of was just like asking questions on that, analyzing that, because for some reason, the root issues with things is never about being separate. It's because of internal like differences that for some reason people believe they cannot be resolved. So they want to live separately, but that's not fixing the issue. It's just trying to find a way of adapting to it. So it's very difficult without using case studies, but I will not use case studies.
No, that's so interesting. And I'll just jump on that by showing how the political also represents the spiritual, right? Because I don't know if you've heard of IFS by Dr. Richard Swartz. It's a psychotherapy. I'm training as a coach. And so I've been delving into psychotherapy. And what happens is exactly what you said inside us, ourselves, as what happens between Taiwan, China, Scotland, UK, blah, 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 blah. I won't go into too many details politically. But what happens is we have different parts within us, our manas and our buddhi, our intellect. When we're not conscious coming from that buddhi, we basically jump from this part, like a protector part almost, like critical and very defensive, and another part that's more, feeling more victimized. And what happens is that one part can become more dysfunctional, and start to attack another part within us. And so that causes a separation and suppression. And so what happens is we start viewing the world like that because we are hurt deep inside. So we start cutting ourselves off. So what happens in the emotional lens also happens on the outside. So because all politics is a huge psychological model, because humans all psychologically work very similarly, and so we've just layered ourselves more complex, and so we can just view countries as like people interacting with each other. And so we can see how these sort of relationships work, and they also relate to our relationships within ourselves. So I don't know if you can speak to how then did they speak about, not exactly a case study, but just the general topics on how can you go about resolving these issues? How can you go about, let's say, using that Piri in the Miri, using wisdom and using an approach to create a more hopeful future for change. How did they approach that? I'm so curious.
Well, they haven't approached it because they're still in a crisis. But it's a difficult one because you can understand why people feel like they need to become separate. When you're backed into a corner and the tension and the pressure rises, you almost go into survival mode where you just want to remove yourself in order to be able to get a new sort of mentality. In order to be able to think, you need to remove that tension and the pressure. But I think we also need to resolve things in a way spiritually, connecting to one another, seeing that similar ideology, having those conversations to be like, we are not necessarily divided and attacking each other, but we just have different objectives. We're not sort of coming at each other, but we just are coming at a different angle, and sort of trying to figure out where our angles are coming from to have a bit more of an open-mindedness on how we can align them. Because our goals are never really that different. We're just taking different directions. Religion's a pathway. Our goal is the same. We're just taking a different path. But yet we are so divided and there's so much tension. It just baffles me. But like, it's the same with politics. For some reason, we want to see ourselves as so separate and we never want to see ourselves alike. And I think when you address that to politics, it's very complex because people struggle to see it. But I think you've got to remove that agenda mentality out of it, about your personal agenda. It's not all about hum, it's not all about the I. And like, if you have that spiritual lens, you can also practically make a lot of like betterment. For example, like the missile period. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had a missile, and he obviously in his missile he was like, well, you know what, for the gain of Punjab, why don't I marry your daughter and we can expand? Think about it, the unity, the collective aim, let's come together. And when you try and align your objectives and see what you want is very much similar, you change your direction. And it's a very difficult question you've given me. How to fix world sort of anger and like how to fix world issues.
Yeah, well, not how to answer like solve the world's issues, but I'm just so curious, like even the students among yourselves, like what was other people's perspectives, because I'm sure other people coming from their backgrounds, other people in their 20s, I'm sure they had quite interesting insights or questions to ask as well.
I think a lot of the conversation was about understanding.
Yes.
And people felt like they had lived such a secluded lifestyle to only their level of like mentality and like reality that they had no understanding of others. And it's interesting, they would constantly put I and other in such casual language. And I think they wanted to break that down, the other, and sort of come as like a unity in us. And that was the main thing. They just wanted to learn. I think humans are forced to only know what's put before them. And we sometimes want more. We want to learn more. We want to be compassionate to others. And I think a lot of the conversation, for example, about Germany, people felt like, yes, it's diverse, but everyone's in their own pocket. We want to get to know each other. And it's the same with countries. We can share the culture. We haven't got to be so separate. We want to learn about each other. When it comes down to the actual people within, internally, it's a very different story. So I think as youth, we just wanted to connect and have that human interaction rather than that commercial interaction.
Exactly. And it's just about that authentic human to human, heart to heart talk. Instead of being like, I am this culture, I am that culture, but seeing past that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I feel like even fixing the issue in coaching, we learn, someone's in front of you. You're not trying to fix them. They are also curious. They're also whole. They've got all the answers within them. But it's about seeking to understand the other. And a lot of people, when they're in even just normal relationships, sometimes they're trying to fix the issue rather than just listening and understanding the person's point of view. Because chances are that people just want to get along. People just want to understand each other. People just want to have happiness and love. Because that's a kind of basic human necessity. I think 99% of humans, want this. Even like the most corrupt humans, maybe this is got like some sort of very optimist view of the world, but I feel like they might only be corrupt because deep down they have a fear that they might not be that's the only way that they can survive, but deep down there might be some fear. But just extending the hand, and often people can feel secluded and alone. Like I know I feel when I'm alone for too long and I'm cut off, that I can get into this homai mindset, me. But that's why in Sikhism we talk about Sangat, connecting to people with that same, to pull you up when you're down. And I don't know, like just for people watching this, how do you how do you keep a good Sangat? How do you like keep in good company?
The Sangat you're around is your Sangat you become. Wow. And that's just the friends you surround yourself with is the person you will become. So it's not like how do you make sure how do you keep the people around you in a good place? You just have to sometimes accept that everyone is different. And if you want to go in a certain direction, unfortunately, you have to take yourself out of those groups you don't want to be in because you don't want to be that person anymore and go to the ones you do. And I feel like I've been very fortunate when I joined Sikh Society at my university and I became president in my final year. All of the London universities came together as a collective for the first time probably ever. And we just united. We have weekly, fortnightly meetings. All of the London News, the main ones. How can we connect? How can we come together as one? We've got one goal. I don't know why we're trying to compete with each other. There aren't that many Sikhs in London. We can't fight for them all. So we need to come together. And yeah, like my Sangat changed. I took myself out of, for example, I don't go clubbing anymore. I don't drink. I never smoked. There's certain things in my life that I didn't like. And I needed to stop forcing them upon myself. Like, this is a social norm, I must do it. So I removed myself and surrounded myself with people that were already at the point of what I want to achieve. You want to grow from people, then you need to be around people that you want to grow from, with knowledge that you want to receive. And I think that's how to have good Sangat, is to just realize that you've got to be a little bit selfish, and sometimes some people aren't good for you. You can love someone, you can have love for that person, but that doesn't mean that they are what you want to become. And sometimes you have to just be a little bit selfish and remove yourself from that if that's not the direction you want to go in. And you can still care for that person and love that person, but you just perhaps surround yourself with a different energy, and that's okay. We're very diverse people and we have very different interests. My friendship circles, I don't have one group. I have lots of individuals with so many different backgrounds, different interests. And when I feel like I want to be going and growing a certain way, I navigate myself towards that direction that they're in as well. And I think that's okay to do. When everything's not linear, like nothing's linear, like it's okay.
Yeah, and then often people can get stuck in that mindset of like, I must do this to do this to do this. And we forget, hey, how does a plant grow? It's literally like this, right? It's not like, I must get this friend group to do this, friend group to do this, right? Yeah. So and also like exactly what you said, if it doesn't serve you, let it go. Like Elsa said in Frozen, just let it go because it's your life. You can just take responsibility.
Mm.
And at the same time, sometimes taking responsibility is not like you have to do something. It's just letting go.
Mm. I think you've got to appreciate the relationships you have in your life. And as long as you're only doing good to others and
Yes.
you're only ever giving your energy and time to put to people, you can't necessarily beat yourself up for then leaving, for example, a friendship or leaving a situation. We need to stop realizing that things are supposed to be in our lives forever.
Mm,
Things aren't set. Things aren't supposed. Appreciate the person in your life for the time that they are there,
mm.
and accept it if they leave, or accept it if you want to leave. It's okay. Like, just appreciate the time and make the most of each minute and each moment, being good to each other and being kind to each other, and then just let things be.
Ah, amazing words. So I think we're actually hitting an hour now. So maybe we can just begin to slowly wrap up. When I do coaching, Tira, my sister, you've met her.
Mm.
She came up with this beautiful phrase: "Go slow to go far," and it kind of represents Miri Piri in that sense because go slow, we're connecting to ourselves, and go far, Miri. We want to enact in the world. So I just want to ask, like, how, because obviously for me, I'm quite an extrovert. I like to do so many things at once. How, and I know you
Mm.
do as well.
Yeah.
How do you try to go slow to go far? And people watching this, how, what advice would you give? Final advice to be like, go slow to go far.
It's hard. I'll be honest with people. Like, it's hard when you get a taste of something to not just want to keep consuming it, to not want to
Yes.
keep just having it. Like, I love being busy. Like, I love having my mind constantly stimulated by different things. But I think you get to the point where your body's very clever. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you you're doing too much. Your body will say to you, you feel ill. You'll notice it if you just focus on what you're producing as well. Your output, the quality is not good. That's okay. That doesn't mean you need to change something. It means you need to slow.
Mm,
And I think go at the speed your body tells you to go at. And I think we constantly want to add so much science to things like, oh, let me take this, and this, and this, and let me add this to my life, or let me add this vitamin, let me do this. And of course, help yourself.
mm,
But your body's so clever. We're God's creation. We're made in such a beautiful way. We're so fun, like fantastic, just in how we are. Our bodies are self-sufficient. It's like, for example, the planet. The planet doesn't need us. We need the planet. Our
mm.
bodies are so self-sufficient. It's us that are decaying them. Like, just listen to yourself, listen to your body, go at your body's speed, and notice when things don't feel right. You get gut feelings and you sometimes feel a bit ill if you overdo it. Like, that's okay. Don't trying to reach the level and do as much as the world is telling you to do. Once again, go in. Really, the motto of this is just to go in.
Just
Stop
to go
looking
in.
outward and just to go in, just to reflect. Take a minute. That one ikjot, that one light, that oneness. Have that oneness. Eco seep oneness growth. That's what's coming to
Yes.
my head right now. We did a campaign on this
That's right.
about the oneness and connecting. And I think when it comes down to going slow and you'll go far, it's because everything's already in. The knowledge is already there. Connecting to Maharaj, connecting to God, connecting to Vaiguruji, Allah is already there. It's in, and you just need to rediscover it.
Yes.
And I think that's how I'd answer that.
So beautiful. That was illuminating if I've ever heard something. So thank you, Davina. Um, yeah, that was amazing. And there's an inner voice inside of you. Follow it. It might be quiet sometimes, it might be loud sometimes. Follow it and you can't go wrong. Because like my Nana ji said, and I've said this last time, do things wholeheartedly. Because if you do things wholeheartedly, it will be a source of pleasure for you and your family. And you got one life. So do the performance immaculate. That was his
Mm.
words. And and I still carry that forward for today because
Mm.
ultimately when we die and when we go, that's kind of what we want to remember. We want to remember, hey, I did live true to myself and that voice inside me and that naturalness inside of me too.
Mhm.
So thank you so much, Davina. Is there any last things you'd like to say?
Um, no, if anyone has any questions, reach out to me. I think there's so much more we could have covered.
There's so
I
much more,
think,
honestly. Yeah.
yeah, there's so much more, but what could I tell people? Should I give
Where,
someone a
where,
piece of
yeah, where can they reach out to you? If they
uh,
were interested, or if they even wanted to collaborate, if they're Sikh or Punjabi people, even other people of any
I
faith.
feel like I hate to be so professional, but LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
I hate to be like that, but I genuinely reply to all my messages
Amazing.
on LinkedIn. So yeah, that's the best way because I'm more than easy. It's such an easy way to help people on there as well and direct you.
Cool. Are
But
you
yeah,
happy of me to put your LinkedIn in the description
yeah,
so people
that's
can reach out?
completely fine.
Okay.
That's completely fine.
So, guys, if you're interested in what we discussed today, and if you're politically focused, if you're justice focused, or even if you want to learn more about Sikhism or just about spirituality in general, reach out to me, reach out to Davina. If you enjoyed this conversation, but thank you so much again for Davina for
Thank
your
you.
time. That was an amazing conversation, and
Thank you for inviting me and putting it together and having the idea to do it.
you're very, very welcome. It's always a pleasure to have this
Yeah.
sort of discussion. It's enriching for the soul. So, good night to everybody watching this. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a good rest of the week ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye, everyone.